Today, he found himself under fire from the island's chief minister.
But it comes from one disaffected person who...
And the battle went on, even after the headphones came off.
Frank, we're talking about dead children.
Yes, Stuart, exactly. So you shouldn't be politicising. You're trying to shaft Jersey internationally.
But for the senator, it's not what people think about Jersey that worries him.
By the First Minister, Frank Walker, and the former Health Minister, Stuart SYVRET, you heard there in the film, and with me in the studio is the campaigner and the President of Childline, Esther Ranson. When you talk, Mr SYVRET, about a cultural problem, does that suggest that you're not entirely surprised? Sorry, can you hear me, Mr SYVRET, or not?
You're very faint, so could you repeat that, please?
Yes, I'll repeat the question. Yes, when we heard you in that piece talking about a cultural problem in the way that childcare was dealt with in Jersey, does that suggest you're not surprised?
I was aware of deficiencies within the service, but certainly early last year the kind of information that started to be brought to my attention by whistleblowers, by witnesses and by victims was surprising at that stage. But as the year progressed, it became depressingly familiar, which is why, unfortunately, I wasn't truly shocked to learn of the events here.
Do you have a view about why there could have been that cultural problem on Jersey?
It's absolutely clear that the island's authorities, that its child welfare, child protection apparatus has failed systemically over a period of decades. That much is plain, it's undeniable. Personally, I think that's happened because of the absence of proper checks and balances in the island. For example, there's a very unhealthy overlap between the legislature and the judiciary, and even within the departments of government. People who are really supposed to be kind of overseeing and regulating each other are basically friends. They know each other. They work in the same building, often from the same offices. So there isn't really the kind of independent, rigorous oversight of these systems, which I think goes quite a long way to explaining why the system has failed to protect these children.
Mr Walker, that's a pretty damning indictment, isn't it?
It is, but you should remember it comes from one of 53 members of our Assembly, one disaffected member who has publicly stated that his ambition is to bring down the government and the judiciary of Jersey, the whole establishment as he would call it, and who incidentally was personally responsible for the care of our children in Jersey for 8 years.
You see, as against that, Mr Walker, hang on, yes, I understand your point, but against that we have to set your own comment that we saw just a moment ago in response to the remark we're talking about dead children. You said we're trying to promote the international image of Jersey.
Mr Paxman, I said no such thing.
We just heard you say it in the radio studio.
No, Mr Paxman, you have not heard me say anything remotely approaching that in connection with this hideous and horrible situation that Jersey now finds itself in. Far from it.
The words precisely were
is to support the police.
Mr Walker, I'll just remind you, you obviously didn't hear the piece. We are trying to show off Jersey internationally was what you said in that radio studio. The viewers heard it, perhaps you didn't.
Mr Paxman, I said no such thing today whatsoever.
Okay.
What I said
All right,
was
I'm going to bring in Esther Ranson here. You presumably did hear that, did you?
Jeremy, what concerns me most about this whole story is that what we're listening to is politicians. Actually, what we're concerned about is the welfare of children. Children over decades in the care of the local authority who was supposed to be taking the place of neglectful parents. And what worries me so much is that a closed community, any closed community, be it the church, be it a boarding school, which I once had to investigate, can create a culture of abuse in which children are helpless to ask for protection.
When you set up Childline, did you set it up in Jersey?
What happened was we set it up UK-wide in 1986, and then the authorities in Jersey came to us and said, we're a bit concerned, we're such a small community, could we have a special line for our children, for our Jersey children, that you can answer in London? So we did that over a period of time. And I hope and expect that we're now trawling our archives to see if any of the children that rang that line actually came from the care home that we're talking about.
But that suggests, doesn't it, that a recognition on their part that there was a need for an external voice?
It certainly does. There were a number of local authorities throughout the UK that did that, and Jersey was one of them. So clearly someone in Jersey was very well aware that children are vulnerable in such a closed community.
Senator SYVRET, when you have had allegations of difficulties, for example, there was one example cited in that piece we saw a moment or two ago, have you had the impression they've been treated seriously?
It depends upon the occasion. Some occasionally incidents have been treated very seriously, others have not. And certainly some instances that were serious and even recognised internally by various departments were not actually reported upon to the relevant authorities. Certainly I was put in touch with information by whistleblowers that was withheld from me as the minister for a long time. So there clearly has been a culture of cover-up here, and I agree absolutely with Esther Ranson. What matters here is the children, and I think what we have to do is recognise that we have failed, the system has failed in Jersey to protect vulnerable children for decades, and we've got to look at the systemic failures within our public administration that let that happen.
You think the system has failed?
Indeed, the system has failed. The community is a good community, good people in it, but I'm afraid the inherent structural weaknesses in our system of government and in our establishment have led us to this.
Mr. Walker, that's a pretty serious accusation that there's been a structural failure of the system there.
Well, there is no evidence to support that, and let me say that Jersey has a record here of being a very law-abiding community, and a record going back centuries of democratic government and of prosecuting offenders vigorously in our courts, and that's exactly what we will do in this situation.
Esther Ranson, hang on just a second, Mr. Walker. Esther Ranson wants to ask you something. Go on.
Mr. Walker, can I just say to you that when a child is suffering in the way these children suffered, in a culture of abuse, in an institution where they have nowhere to turn because they think everybody working within that institution knows what's going on and is conspiring to keep them silent, using any means. We've heard about punishment, intimidation and so on. What has to happen is the whole community has to be very aware that they have got to look after those children. You've got to let fresh air in. You've got to let visitors in. You've got to set up a specific system that allows those children to disclose. It's not about whether Jersey is a wonderful place, because I'm sure it is. It's not about whether Jersey people are law-abiding. It's about paedophiles and child abusers seeking out the most vulnerable children and silencing them while they do these terrible crimes.
Mr. Walker?
Esther, I agree entirely, but we're looking back here at situations 30 or 40 years ago. Nevertheless...
That doesn't minimise them, does it?
No, of course it doesn't, but that's what I'm saying. Jersey will bring anyone who has perpetrated one of these horrible crimes and who may have conspired in a cover-up. We will bring them vigorously to justice, and they will feel the full weight of our courts, which is equally weighty to that in the UK.
All right, gentlemen, and Esther... OK, I'm sorry, we must end it there. Thank you both, and thank you, Esther Ranson, very much. Just to clarify, the Jersey Chief Minister's exact words were, "You're trying to shaft Jersey internationally."